Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Michael Yoshi. I'm a retired clergy in the conference and been designated as pastor emeritus at Buena Vista United Methodist in Alameda. And I'm also the co-chair of the Friends of Wadi Faqeen, which is a partnership with the village of Wadi Faqeen in the Bethlehem district in the West Bank. So today's focus is about the BDS movement for Palestinian liberation. Let me ask you first, how many of you are aware of BDS? How many of you are not so aware of it? First time. How many of you are involved in a BDS campaign? Okay, so most people are aware of BDS, but not involved in the BDS campaign. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a little bit of history of the BDS movement and also our engagement as United Methodist Church, so to help you understand somewhat how we have engaged as a United Methodist with the BDS movement. So somebody tell me, what does BDS stand for? Okay, boycott, divestment, and sanctions. And so drawing from what happened in South Africa during the 80s, Palestinians began to look at how to utilize boycott, divestment, and sanctions as a nonviolent response to a very violent occupation that they had been enduring for many years. And it was in 2005 that different people in Palestinian civil society came together to launch what they called the BDS movement for Palestinian freedom. And it's interesting to note for us is that the United Methodist intersection with that came around that time. It was, in fact, in 2006, your current bishop, Sandy Olawine, was our liaison to the West Bank. She had served there from 1996 until 2006, and she was wrapping up her tenure at that time. And one of the last acts she did as the liaison was to convene United Methodists from across the country to come to Bethlehem for a conference, particularly to educate people on the new launching of the BDS movement in Palestine and for Palestinians. You may know that Bishop Olawine at that time was serving as a liaison, but her primary duties was as a pastor. So she was pastoring to Palestinian Christians. And if you can imagine that her attempt to bring us together to focus on BDS movement was a different expression of ministry, but one very, very important for her to organize while she was ending her 10-year time there. And so there were a number of us that went to Bethlehem, Palestine for that conference. From Cal, Nevada, myself and Larry George went along with one of our staff people. And then there were about 8 or 9 or 10 other conferences that were represented there as well. And so we were given the landscape of what had taken place to Palestinians since the 1948, what they call the Nakba, the catastrophe, and the rationale for a support for this nonviolent movement of boycott, divestment, and sanctions, in which we would use economic activism as a way to address the ongoing and continuing violence that has been taking place against Palestinians. And so our task, as I would refer to her now as our former liaison to Palestine, she charged us with going back to our conferences and to start task forces in which we can begin to educate people about the Palestinian reality and also the BDS movement that was just getting launched. And so that was my task with Larry George, to come back here and to convene a task force. And we did that through the Board of Missions. And so this event today is being sponsored by one of the sponsors of this event today is the Palestine Task Force that Patricia Doherty now chairs. Yeah. And I think there are other co-chairs and maybe other members of the task force could stand up so we can see you all. So these folks are holding the space for you around this. As you can imagine, for any of you who have gone through the challenges of being educated around the Palestinian narrative, it takes time. And so the task force had to take time to educate our conference and also to be engaged with local congregations and the community at large. And but nonetheless, the task force got started in 2006. And then along the way, interestingly, the Kairos Palestine document was issued in 2009. How many are familiar with Kairos Palestine? Okay, not as many are familiar with that. So this was the Palestinian Christian word to the world about what was taking place in Palestine. And that was modeled after the Cairo, South Africa document, which was issued in 1985. Similarly, Christian voices speaking out about the injustices that were taking place in South Africa, but also that was an endorsement of the divestment movement in the 1980s. And so Kairos Palestine in 2009 became the forebearer of Christian responses here in the United States and around the world to begin responding, because they were also endorsing the BDS movement. Specifically, as Christian leaders in Palestine, they were endorsing the BDS movement. And so what took place from there is that our task force and representatives here convened in Chicago in 2010. And I think there were about, again, 8 or 9 or 10 conferences that started task forces like ours here. And we convened in Chicago to start what's called United Methodist Kairos Response, which the name, of course, alludes to the Kairos document. And that was the United Methodist iteration for boycott, divestment, sanctions internationally. That became an international network for us to express ourselves through BDS activities. And you're going to hear in a moment from one of the co-chairs of the current UMKR network. And then you'll learn more about the activities that they are involved in as well. Later on, I want to come back, if we have some time, to talk about a divestment initiative in Alameda County. How many of you here are from Bay District? Okay, this concerns you, and I'm going to make sure you get the information before you leave today. So I'm going to stop there, and then we'll turn it over to our other presenters, I think, who are online.
Yeah. Good. So I'm sorry I cannot be with you in person today. I'm not far from you in the Bay. My name is Dov Baum. I work with the American Friends Service Committee. That's the Good Quakers. And I'm also a member of a group called Israelis for BDS. So I've been working in the BDS movement for BDS around the world for many years now. It's 20 years since the Palestinian call for boycott, divestment, and sanctions came out. It came out in July 2005. That's almost exactly 20 years from today. And the call was a call directed at us. It was directed at people of conscience around the world. That's us. It also explicitly directed at Israelis. That's the people I was working with at the time in the Israeli peace movement. And what is it asking us to do? It is asking us to use nonviolent tools such as boycotts, divestment, and sanctions on Israel until it complies with international law and international principles of human rights. And the call comes from the entirety of Palestinian civil society in Palestine. So it has a tremendous, I think, moral power, because these are the people who are most oppressed and most impacted by Israeli apartheid, Israeli occupation, and now Israeli genocide. So what does it mean? Okay, tools such as boycott, divestment, and sanctions, what does it mean? These are tools that have one thing in common. These are tools that are all tools of non-cooperation. In other words, what the Palestinians are asking us to do is not necessarily to liberate Palestine. We are not asked to go and free Palestine. This is a Palestinian movement. It's a Palestinian liberation movement. What we are asked is to just withdraw our own complicity in their oppression. It is a very, very limited ask. It's a very minimalist ask. It's the least they could ask. So our job is to track where is our complicity, where is our direct complicity with the horrible, horrible things we are hearing on the news every day in Palestine. And our complicity can take many forms. And I think most of the work I've been doing over the last 20 years focused on what is called economic activism, economic BDS. In other words, to look at the ways in which our money is used to support Israeli apartheid, genocide, and occupation. And even if you don't have a lot of money, you are part of a system that is an economic system that supports all this. And that is what we need to take into account. We live in a world that is more and more ruled by large corporations. And these large corporations have a tremendous amount of power over our lives, but also over the lives of Palestinians. And when we look around at these large corporations, we sometimes feel very disempowered. What can we do about them? But what we can do is withdraw our participation in their business. That means not buy their products, not invest in their, well-being, not provide them with loans. And even if I am not a tycoon that actually invests in their companies or gives them loans, I have ties to institutions that do. So it could be the United Methodist Church itself. It's an institution that has a lot of money. But it can also be your city or your county or your pension fund. It can also be maybe a community foundation in your area, maybe the place where you go to work, or the university or the school or the hospital where you work or where you volunteer. All of these institutions have money. And so in a way, the BDS movement is encouraging us to reach to these institutions and ask them to have more ethical standards. So this is what we've been doing. And let me jump ahead to the end of the story. Maybe not the end of the story, but the middle of the story where we are now, which is BDS is actually a very successful tactic. It sounds a little weird to say that in the midst of a genocide where hundreds of people are being killed every day just for, standing in line for aid, for humanitarian aid. So it doesn't feel very successful. But when we look at the, power relations in the world, coming from the side of the oppressed, from the Palestinian people, this has been one of the most successful strategies that we have. So, for example, just recently we heard that a multinational shipping company in Denmark called Maersk has announced it will stop shipping any goods to Israeli illegal settlements in the occupied West Bank. That's great. And it was a result of many months of organizing and campaigns and protests around the world. We heard about cities across California, the city of Alameda, the city of Richmond, the city of Hayward, and also in other states like Portland, Maine, that have all announced they would divest. Divest from what? From different things, but divest means they will look into their own investments and make sure they are not invested in the most harmful of companies. And we see other successes all the time. We have schools, California School of the Arts, San Francisco State University have divested, Seattle Pride, the Pride Parade in Seattle just a couple of months ago announced that they will screen all of their corporate sponsorships. It again and again and again. If you want to find out more about these victories, you can go to our website, afsc.org/divest. afsc.org/divest. One more thing I wanted to tell you about it. When you look at these victories, many times there is opposition to them coming from pro-Israel advocates that call them hateful and anti-Semitic and so on. The way to deal with all that is to actually read the news, not just the titles. Go into the actual facts and read what was actually decided in Seattle Pride. What is the actual policy for the California School of the Arts or the city of Alameda? What did they actually decide to do? And that's why we put up this website that I just said, afsc.org/divest, because we wanted you to be able to actually read what actually happened. In all of these cases, one after the other, our institutions, our cities, our universities, they are our church, yes, they all come up with a policy that is about, let's have an ethical policy. Let's try and check our relationships with corporations using a universal standard of human rights and human dignity. And when they do that, they decide to stop investing in companies that run private prisons. They decide to stop investing in weapons companies that harm people all around the world. They decide to stop investing in mass surveillance of immigrants in our own communities here at home. They decide to stop investing and stop getting sponsorships from companies that destroy our planet and pollute land and the air and the water. And this is really what corporate America is most concerned about. And that's why when we see the backlash movement, it is led by corporate America. It is led by energy companies, by weapons companies, and by their proxies in government that we all know about. So this is really not just about Palestine. This is about the future of not just democracy, but I would say even life on Earth. Because when you care about life, you care about life everywhere. So I will pause here, and hopefully we will have time to talk about specific campaigns later.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lisa Bender, and I'm coming to you from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. So it'd be a little hard for me to be there with you today, but I wish I could be. I'm the co-chair of United Methodist for Kairos Response, known as UMKR. Michael told you about our founding in 2010. We are a grassroots justice movement, very independent, but we speak to the United Methodist Church, not for the United Methodist Church. And we're responding to that Kairos Palestine document that you heard was written by the Palestinian community in 2009 as a sort of cry for help. They're asking the churches around the world to come on their behalf to help them. And they asked us to engage in boycotts and divestment as part of our response to them. So I want to tell you about how the United Methodist Church as a denomination has addressed BDS and what has happened as a result of our efforts. So as you heard, boycotts and divestments are moral, nonviolent economic actions, and they are ways to show people power. And they do work when done by many people together. First, you know who the founder of the Methodist Church is, right? John Wesley. Well, John Wesley was the first Methodist to do a boycott. He supported a boycott of sugar as a way of protesting the slave trade. So yay for John Wesley. Since the days of John Wesley, the United Methodist Church has engaged in a variety of boycotts and divestment work as part of our efforts to stand up for the disenfranchised, the silenced, and the oppressed, as Jesus taught us to do in stories like him turning the tables upside down in the temple to protest unjust practices. So I'd like to share my screen now for the rest of my presentation. So let me see, where did it go? All right, so boycotts and divestment were widely used in the civil rights movement and in the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa. And in recent years, some of the boycotts that United Methodist supported included boycotts of Nestle, Taco Bell, Mount Olive, Pickles, and Wendy's. Most of those were out of concern for farm workers. And those boycotts ended when the companies changed their policies, which of course is what we want. So I don't know if you are familiar with the United Methodist social principles. And I know there's a lot of youth here today. So if you don't know about the social principles, be sure to ask your leaders. Now, here's a quote from the social principles that's about boycotts and divestment. It says we support peaceful and nonviolent efforts, including boycotts, letter writing campaigns, appeals to stockholder and divestiture as effective means of expressing collective dissatisfaction with companies that engaged in unjust or harmful practices. And we also have a book of resolutions, and we have statements adopted by our General Conference, several of which mention boycotts and divestment as a method of taking a stand. And here we call on all nations to prohibit the import of products made by companies in Israeli settlements on Palestinian land. And over the past few years, the UMKR, and sometimes joined by our General Board of Church and Society, we've joined larger coalition boycotts, which led to changes by companies like these. Hewlett-Packard, SodaStream, Pillsbury, and currently we've adopted the boycott of Chevron. So in all of these cases, we wrote letters to the CEOs of those companies, and we told them why we were planning to boycott them. We asked them to respond within a short period of time, and they have never responded. And so we would adopt the boycott. So as far as Chevron goes, there's a lot of reasons for boycotting Chevron. And I know you're going to hear some more of those later. But UMKR is involved because the company operates gas fields off the coast of Gaza and controls a pipeline that passes along Gaza's coast. Profit from these gas fields and the pipeline go to Israel, when really, according to international law, those gas fields and their profits should belong to Gaza. Chevron is providing Israel with billions of dollars in revenue, which means more money for the Israeli government to continue its brutal military occupation, whose goal is to take over all of Palestinian land and displace the people. So we have a letter to the CEO of Chevron that you are all invited to sign, and it is on our website. So if you go to our website, kairosresponse.org, you will see it on our homepage. And if you click on the Chevron icons, you will go to the page that has that letter. And then you can send a letter to the CEO yourself. So moving on to divestment, which, is selling or not owning stock in unethical companies. The United Methodist Church decided many years ago not to invest in 6 types of investments. Those are tobacco, alcohol, weapons, adult entertainment, gambling, and private prisons. Our pension board, Westpath, does not invest in these companies. And chances are, if your churches have investments, that they've asked that these companies not be included as well. Now, in recent years, UMKR has had an impact on some actions that have been taken by our pension board. Our pension board's name is Westpath, and we've had an impact on them around investments in companies that do harm in Palestine. Human rights violations that are going on there violate international law. So in 2014, the United Methodist for Kairos Response learned that a private prison company named G4S had contracts with Israel to provide security systems for prisons in Israel where Palestinians, including Palestinian children, were taken and imprisoned, often without any charges being filed. Does that sound familiar? Yeah. After we provided information about this to Westpath and learned that they had investments, they did own G4S, they realized that they should not own it, and they did sell it. So we had a good victory. And then in early 2016, after Westpath did some more study and sent some of their staff to visit Israel, Palestine to speak with human rights agencies there, our pension staff on their own sold the stock that they owned in 3 Israeli banks and put other Israeli banks on their do not invest list. So as you can see, these articles were in the New York Times. When the United Methodist Church talks, people listen. The opinions and decisions of faith leaders continue to carry a lot of weight and are worthy of publicity, which is what we want. So when stories are covered widely, the impact grows, others join, and Palestinians feel less alone, less forgotten. So we boycott and divest, and the successes give hope to our Palestinian friends. And as you heard, this is 20 years since the official BDS campaign started. And there have been many wins, as Dove said, and much publicity, leading to a much larger populist campaign to free Palestine. Now, at General Conference a year ago, UMKR and our supporters submitted several resolutions in support of Palestinian rights. One of them says that United Methodists should not own government bonds in countries maintaining prolonged military occupations. We named 3 countries that fulfilled this definition. Israel has occupied Palestine for well over 50 years. Turkey has occupied northern Cyprus for over 50 years, and Morocco is occupying Western Sahara, again, more than 50 years. So that resolution passed. And for the past year, we have been pressing Westpath to implement this resolution because they own government bonds in all of those countries. At this time, we have started a petition to Westpath. This is very important to those of you who are clergy, who have your pension with Westpath, or if any of you are church employees whose retirement fund is with Westpath, we'd love for you to sign this petition to them. So I have created here a QR code. Let me see, can I move that? Yes. So if you point your phone up to this, I hope, very large QR code, I hope that you can see the link that it will take you to the actual petition. And you can read the petition. At the bottom, there's a list of advanced signers that includes a number of our bishops and some higher ups in our church structure. And keep scrolling, because underneath there is the blank places where you can put in your name and your email and send that off to us. When we get a lot of names, we're going to send that to Westpath as further proof that we United Methodists do not want to be holding bonds in these governments. So, and in response to our requests to carefully avoid companies violating human rights, Westpath has also created a special fund for those of you who are clergy or church employees with a fund at Westpath. So it's called the Social Values Choice suite of funds. This shows you what it looks like on Westpath's website, and that's the equity fund. They also have a bond fund and another. There's 3 funds in this suite of funds. And so this one meets higher standards when it comes to human rights and higher standards when it comes to climate change. So those are both things that I think the folks in the room today probably care a lot about. So I would encourage you to look at those. Also, UMKR is participating in a new effort to give congregations a way to call for support for Palestinian rights and freedom. It's a pledge that says your church or organization will be apartheid-free. It was introduced 2 years ago by a coalition of faith-based advocates for Palestine from many mainline and peace churches. There's now over 600 signatories. So we urge you to look at the pledge, and you can find it at apartheidfree.org. And you can introduce this to your congregation, to show it to your pastor, ask to speak with your council about it, and see if you can't get your church to sign it. Many resources can be found on UMKR's website. We've been doing webinars since 2020 and on a variety of topics around Palestinian rights, and they are all on our website, in addition to so much other material. So I urge you to take a look at our website. And while you're there, be sure you sign up for UMKR's e-blasts and action alerts. You can find the place to do that on our website's homepage, kairosresponse.org, as you see there. So thank you so much. I appreciate hearing our speakers and being part of this today. And I look forward to the rest of the day. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Joan Pell, and I am the chair of our conference Climate Justice Ministries Task Force, which is a part of the Advocacy and Justice Committee, along with several other task forces. We are concerned about climate justice, and in particular, fossil fuels. So fossil fuels are driving greenhouse gas emissions, leading to global warming, leading to changed weather around the world, and as a consequence, droughts and floods and everything you'll see, fires and things you're seeing. Fossil fuels, or the big oil companies in particular, are also responsible for a lot of environmental destruction. Janelle's going to talk a little bit about the Philippines and Chevron. Chevron being one of the big oil companies, is one of the worst actors. It's a corporation that ravages lands, poisons rivers and streams, destroys communities, ruins people's health, and more. So taking a tip from the BDS movement, climate justice folk around the world have started to use divestment as a tool and are trying to get people to divest from fossil fuels. And I think the figures were back in 2024, but 1,600 institutions have divested $40.63 trillion dollars from fossil fuel companies, and 35% of those are faith organizations. So you might have heard of Fossil Free UMC. Sharon Delgado, Reverend Sharon Delgado, is at another lunch today, but I think she's chair of the Fossil Free UMC, but they've been pushing to get money from the United Methodist Church out of all oil companies. It matches well with the Chevron boycott because Chevron is obviously one of those big companies. You know, I've come to realize John Wesley, we heard John Wesley spoken about earlier. He wrote a sermon on the use of money, and you probably all know it all as earn all you can, save all you can, give all you can. The save was in order that you can give all you can. But nowadays, how we save our money is just as important as how we spend our money. Because as we save it, unless you're burying it in the ground, which Jesus had something to say about that as well, then you are putting it somewhere. And where you put it is going to be important. So we're encouraging everyone to divest from fossil fuels. There is a item 15 on divestment for our boards and agencies, California, Nevada boards and agencies. We held a summit that you will have heard about in the last plenary session today, and that is coming to you in one of the legislative sections, B, I think, tomorrow. Encouraging, supporting, putting pressure on our own boards and agencies to divest. Divesting from fossil fuels is an act of climate justice, because those fossil fuel companies are ruining the environment for us. They're causing global warming. Then the impacts are disproportionate. It's the nations that contribute least to greenhouse gas emissions that are most impacted by climate change. And it's those who live in the poorer communities, often people of color, that are most affected by where the fossil fuel companies are. Talk to some people from Richmond, California, or Torrance, California, and see what's going on in their communities. So I encourage you to divest from fossil fuels. As Lisa was mentioning, you can divest your pension. We have a display table, climate justice, right next to the Advocacy and Justice table, with some leaflets from Fossil Free UMC about how to divest your United Methodist pension. And we also have a new website, climate-cnumc.org, where you can find a lot of things related to climate justice. So thank you.
Hello, I am Janelle Ablola. I'm the co-chair of the Philippine Solidarity Task Force and also pastor at United Methodist Church in San Francisco. Thank you. Pronouns are they, them, theirs. So I wanted to let's just do a chant together. Yeah. So I'm going to say long live, and y'all will say international solidarity with that tempo, yeah? Long live
international solidarity.
Long live
International solidarity.
time. Long live
International solidarity.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about international solidarity and what Chevron's relationship is to the Philippines. We also have signed on to this resolution as well, and part of it is because that Chevron has had investments in the Philippines since 1917. If you subtract 15 years from that, that was during the Philippine-American War, in which US soldiers killed 1 million Filipinos. Yeah. Some folks might not know that. So just think about that, like a little bit over 15 years after that, Chevron came in. So Chevron throughout the years has had various investments there. Joan had mentioned mining, and there's things like geothermal projects, renewable energy projects as well out in the countryside and rural areas. And then in the urban areas, we have pipes and also pollution. And these are things happening throughout the country of the Philippines. So we see that Chevron's presence has been having a negative impact on both the urban poor in the Philippines and also the folks who live in the countryside and rural areas. So all exploited people throughout the cities and countryside are affected by Chevron's projects. Even though they might try to whitewash them by saying that they're providing jobs and education, we know that it does lots of harm to communities there in the Philippines. Another fact of the Philippines is the deadliest place for environmentalists in Asia since 2012. Human rights violations have been abounding in the Philippines since then, especially for those who speak out to defend the environment, those who are trying to protect their lands. The Philippine military has been linked to the highest number of documented killings and detentions of land and environmental defenders in the Philippines over the past decade. A lot of the projects that Chevron has right now happens to coincide where we've seen human rights violations happen with the military or with private militia in the area. And then currently, President Marcos Jr. is planning on positioning the Philippines as a leading exporter of transition minerals. So this is to help us move towards renewable energy. But the thing is that it's already harming the lives and the natural environment that the communities rely on. They're displacing indigenous people, they're displacing communities as they do this, and they're placing communities in increasing danger as well. And this isn't only isolated to this time in US history or in Philippine history. Obama, in his pivot to Asia, this is part of that. Biden's Indo-Pacific economic framework, where he wanted to focus on economic integration with the Indo-Pacific. This is all a part of that. And then Trump's sowing seeds of war and increasing military presence and military agreements across Asia. This is all part of it. It's a systemic problem, and Chevron is benefiting from it. Not only that, they advocate for it and working with certain folks in the Philippines, the elite in the Philippines. So, and I also want to emphasize that it's not that these communities or indigenous people are against development. They're supportive of development, but they would rather folks work with them and that their sovereignty, their rights, their health, their security be assured and respected as well. And so the importance of international solidarity is really key in these movements where we're trying to liberate our lands, where we're trying to end colonialism, where we're trying to make sure that people are free and having their basic needs met. This is especially important as we continue to increase and strengthen our struggle to defend God's creation from empire's greed. Are y'all with me?
Yes.
All right. Long live
International solidarity.
Long live!
International solidarity.
Long live!
International solidarity.
Thank you. Let's join together in this. Let's join together in this fight.
Okay, I just wanted to say to the speaker, I couldn't see you, but I think what you're saying is 100% true. Really, it's not about walking around with a list of things to boycott. That is not what makes a difference. What makes a difference is when we have an impactful campaign and we get a company such as Chevron to change its policy. And specifically when it comes to, and that's another example of why a list is not good enough. Specifically with Sabah Hummus, we were successful. Sabah Hummus does not it used to be 50% owned by an Israeli company. It's no longer the case. So, go ahead and buy your food.
I mentioned earlier that we've been working on a campaign in Alameda County. So for those of you who are in the Bay District, this is pertinent to you. But there was a group of folks that got together to bring the issues of divestment to the county. And in the process of it, and meeting with the county treasurer over the course of a few months, he took action himself to divest from Caterpillar. From Alameda County, so $32 million in bonds from Caterpillar. So for those of you who may wonder why Caterpillar's been a target, it's because they've been routinely used for bulldozing of homes and properties, in Palestinian villages, and that's true in the Palestinian village of Wadi Fuqin that we work with. They've had over the years many homes demolished. Hyundai is also a culprit in that as well. So that was a very important action that he took. And at the same time he announced it to the Board of Supervisors, he also was receiving their mandate to create an ethical investment policy that is now being returned back to the county. We hope it'll be on the agenda for July. One of the things I want to share with you that caught us a little bit by surprise, but a group called Christians United for Israel, or CUFI. How many of you know CUFI? Handful of you. How many of you know Christian Zionism? Handful of you. Well, Christian Zionism is of that theological ilk that the second coming of Jesus will come when Israel takes over all the land of Palestine. Mike Huckabee, who's the current ambassador to Israel, has been very public about the fact that there will be no more Palestinian state, in his opinion, and that he calls the land Judea Samaria from biblical terminology. And just Christian Zionists are just a strong proponent of taking the land to usher in the end times. This is a theology that is very challenging for us as Christians to grapple with and to address. And they had 1,500 emails come into the county treasurer opposing the ethical investment policy that he is bringing back to them. So we're mounting a campaign to get 1,500 Christians and other persons of faith, Jews and Muslims as well, to counter that and to call out the fact that the CUFI has parachuted in from out of the state. They're actually based in Texas, but they have a national following. And so this is a theological discussion that's going on in the county right now. So those of you who are in Bay District, see me, because I'll give you, here's the QR code actually here, that takes you to the letter that is now live, and you can sign on. We're having clergy sign on. We're having individuals sign on. We're having churches sign on as well. So if you are in Alameda County, please check the QR code and enter your name there right now. We also want to thank Dov Baum, who's been consulting with the group. And so Dov knows more about this as well. And maybe, Dov, you can say something about the efficacy of ethical investment policies that are part of the divestment movement going on now.
Yeah, I know it sounds really technical, investment policy, blah. But really, the truth of the matter is that this is our money. This is our money. It's our county. It's our tuition money if it's in a university. It's our tax monies if it's in the city or in the county. It's our money, and we don't want this money to work against us. So an ethical investment policy is exactly what it sounds like. What's on the table right now is an investment policy that says we want to invest in the well-being of the people who live in the county. We want to invest in businesses that actually promote good conditions of life. We want to promote, I don't know, cheap housing and small loans to people. So there are these positive aspects of ethical investment. There are also the negative aspects, negative in the way of what we will not invest in. We will not invest in prisons. We will not invest in weapons. We will not invest in egregious behaviors that destroy our planet or exploit workers. So it's not a lot of money. It's not as if the county of Alameda decided not to invest in prison companies, then prisons will collapse. That is not the case at all. The way it works is when more and more and more public investment bodies, like the county, endorse similar ethical investment policies. And they create a new standard for ethical investment, not investing in fossil fuel at all, not just Chevron, yes? So that is the idea, to create this standard. And I will add one more word, just that you know, there's a big struggle around that right now. In fact, in the state of Florida, it is already illegal to have an ethical investment policy. You know, you cannot, it's not just that you cannot divest from Israeli occupation. You cannot divest from anything using your conscience, you know? So that is what the Republicans are running right now.
Let me also add to that. One of the things I'm proud of in our effort in Alameda County, it's a multi-sector campaign, but the faith community has been very highly populated by United Methodists. So the United Methodists have been leading the way with the faith voice in Alameda County. So this is something you can also do in your own county in Northern California. So you can replicate what's been going on there by introducing this to your own county officials as well. And the other thing I want to say also about the criminalization of BDS, many of us have been involved in trying to stop that, but many states have had campaigns against BDS by having laws passed that criminalize it. And then in Palestine itself, people are criminalized for being part of BDS. So for us, for example, Friends of Wadi Hakim, we stay very discreet about how visible we can be about divestment. In fact, I was in the village last January and we talked to a young man who was very involved in economic activism, but he was threatened by the military there. They came to his home, they did a raid in his home, and they told him, you have to stop the activities you're doing or else. And what was the or else? He's got kids. It was kind of left open for him. So I think we have the privilege of being involved in economic activism here, more so. We know also that there are college students that are being criminalized for their activism and calling for divestment on campuses. So it's a very dicey situation, but we do have the privilege of speaking out and being engaged as well. We also have the privilege of investing in support for Palestinians. And over in the corner, we've got T-shirts from Wadi Hakim and hoodies and other materials there, kufiyas as well. So invest in people as well. Thank you.